Ohm sent me an article earlier this week. I thought it was a really good article. The article is titled Ego Killed the Empowered Product Team. It was posted December 11th, 2023. The author is Jeff Gothelf.
Mr.
Gothelf. That's right. I hope I said that right. We were talking about topics for the podcast, and I think I mentioned to you that I really wanted to have an episode on product management and ego.
Yeah.
Was the original idea, and then you sent me this article, and I was like, well, this article is great. This is everything I want to talk about. Nearly everything I want to talk about. I still want to talk a little bit about ego and experience, because ego versus experience when it comes to like Scrum Mastery or product management or organizational design or whatever, that could be a tightrope. For example, in product management, there was a previous podcast that we had that said, well, if you have experience, it should be even easier to get the information and the data that you need to prove that a certain one case over another case to prove the way, right? But at some point, wouldn't you say, how many times do you have to prove the results of the experiment until the team just takes my word that this is what we need to do? I think a lot of times where I develop one like an epic is like a container for many, many stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I work, that's what different systems have different things, but we'll just stay with epic and story for a minute. An epic is more like a high level business goal or an achievement of a high level business goal. And all the stories that lead the way are like little micro steps along the way to achieve that business goal. And as I go about achieving the goal, some of it is evidence-based, but some of it is just like when I cook up the stories originally in the epic to say, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. I may have vetted the business viability of the epic, but that by no means explores all of the functionality potentially that we may develop that go along the way.
And I think that's fine, because intuition has a role. So based on what you know, you project, based on your experience too, to your point, right? And you say, chances are that this is where we want to go, right? But that shouldn't be cast in stone necessarily, because as you're inching toward that, you're constantly validating.
Yeah.
Is this still correct?
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, there's nothing wrong. Yeah. I think that when you're talking about experience and in the light of ego, what happens oftentimes, the other side of it is people who are experienced over time, they manage to build up a level of ego where instead of explaining themselves over and over again, if needed, to those people that are around them, they just say, "Well, because I said so."
Because I said so.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I think it's a two-way street. Because if I was on the other side, I might say, "This time you might be wrong.
Right.
You've been right 50 times, but." Right.
For people that listen to this, if they're not product management, if they're on the Scrum Mastery side of the house, I equate that to when a new product manager or even manager, whatever, or even Scrum Master. Anyway, when someone new joins the team, that's what I'm trying to say. When someone new joins the team and they try to roll out processes that worked on their previous team and it's not working on this new team, like that could be ego at play, because if every team is different, the playbook for this one team and these personalities that made up that team, it doesn't automatically work. You have to explain why you want to have refinements and why refinement is different than the sprint planning and why you're using Scrum in the first place rather than doing whatever. Like, you have to bring people along, and then this where you were talking about like the stairs that were going down, like all collapsed and turned to a slope and you just slid all the way down. Like where that happens is you just don't have a desire to go through that bringing people with you kind of step along the way. And I bring up this super long-winded way of introducing this podcast to say I like this article because it helped me understand how to pull this story out about the slide from I know what to do until over to like just do what I say because I know what to do.
Right.
Like saying I know what to do is not inherently egotistical.
No, that could be experience-based.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And in this situation, you think your experience gives you something you can apply.
Right.
And that's fine. But instead of saying this is the way, right, to people around you, say this might work. We're going to vet this out. Maybe just do a little experiment, whatever, right? I think there's a nuance there that if you're traversing that in that way, you have a much greater chance of getting those people around you to go with you, as opposed to, I've done this before. In my previous company, I did this and it worked. You hear that all the time, people saying that.
Yeah.
And just because it worked in this previous company doesn't mean it will work here. It's a completely new dynamic.
I mean, that right there, it worked at the previous company or worked on a different team, like transferring success from team to team. That right there, I would like that to be its own podcast at some point.
Agreed.
Because there are certainly some things that are transferable. You learn a skill, you learn how to have a difficult conversation, you learn how to lead teams from point A to point B. Sure, all those are transferable, but you learn a framework, you learn a tool, you learn whatever, and those may not necessarily transfer to your other team. Oh, I know a way to break down work, or I know a way to some kind of metrics, what's like a goal, objective, kind of like OKR framework or something like that. Some kind of goal framework that may not work with the new team.
A new team and a new org. I mean, it's a different organization. Their culture's different. So I think you need to kind of look at that as well.
All right, let's dig into the article. I'll post a link to the article in the description. I'm going to call out some highlights and just read them, and the passages we'll kind of talk about them. So I'm going to skip around this article to the relevant points. He says that he kind of opens with the statement that feature teams are told what to do and are measured on delivering output. They're incentivized to ship products, have low levels of collaboration, and almost no autonomy. Product teams, on the other hand, are empowered to solve problems, achieve outcomes, and collaborate across disciplines effectively. I mean, that's basically the difference between empowered teams and feature factories.
Yes,
basically.
exactly.
He just calls it out real early in the article. He's also pulling this and says, hey, Marty Kagan paved this road a while ago, and it shouldn't be new to anyone. To end the introductory paragraph, he ends with, an empowered product team doesn't stand a chance in the face of ego. And then he opens the next paragraph with an absolute zinger of a paragraph header, which, by the way, could have been the title of this article. The jury's out whether I like the original title or this title.
But it says one better.
It says humility is the oxygen for empowered product teams.
It's a fantastic line.
It is a fantastic line. Let's think about that line for a second, because spoiler alert, we're going to read the rest of the article, and there's a good conclusion paragraph in this article. However, if you think about oxygen, the purpose of, I don't know, living, starting a fire, like many, many, many reasons, like the less oxygen there is, the less intense the fire can burn. The less oxygen there is, the less intense you can work. You know what I mean? The less and less and less you have of it, the less functional your team becomes.
Right.
So it actually is a really great analogy for saying, hey, humility, it's like oxygen. You have less of it, and things don't really work.
They
too
just
well.
don't. Yeah, that's very true. I like this kind of this analogy or metaphor better than the fuel metaphor. You know, humility is the fuel for empowered product teams, but oxygen works better, I think.
Yeah. Also, I like that because also like the egotistical people can just suck all the oxygen out of the room, and there's nothing left, nothing left for anyone else.
That's very true.
That's right. So he says, inevitably, teams and organizations struggle to put this model into place, the model of empowered teams we were talking about, consistently causing frustration, blame, and ultimately suboptimal products and services. The teams working to help their customers are frustrated. The people who suffer the most with this failed pursuit are the end users and the customers.
Yeah, I certainly concur with that, but I also think there's something else there. He hasn't necessarily called it out. People that suffer are you lose good people, basically, right? They get frustrated. They won't stick around. If they're frustrated, they're going to move. And so if those people are good, you're going to lose them because the structure you put in place is like that.
I think that's accurate. I think I worked for at least one organization like that, probably several teams like this before, but one organization in particular I'm thinking about that had just a giant ego near the top of the food chain. Once people rose in seniority to the level where they, like the glass ceiling they were butting up against was that person, and they realized they were never going to get above that person just because of the ego in place, that was when they usually left. And some people it took years to get there. Some people that caught on and were real strong, hard workers and real sharp, they got there sooner. But again, I remember staying in that company watching just the churn as people realize that this is where the glass ceiling's at, and time to keep your resume updated and move. I imagine anyone listening to this who probably realizes there are glass ceilings at their company, like it's a shame, because I would think that, like, if you're a CEO or a manager of a company, a leader in a company, right? Boy, you would want to just break all those glass ceilings and be all right, that can't happen, that can't happen, because they were career dead ends for people, and
for sure.
As soon as they saw it, you know, the younger the person, the quicker they would make the decision with that. Like the sooner they saw that block, they were gotta move.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a leader and you want to make this change, you won't be able to do that if you yourself are mired in this cloud of ego, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you brought in people that are below you, right? And so you brought them in. Now, for you to say, okay, this isn't what we want, or move them sideways, is basically an admission of failure. It looks bad on you because you brought them in. So you're less likely to do that. it kind of feeds on itself, I think.
The sad part about this, like what I was just describing about the up and coming people, I mean, the people who are going to carry the company forward into the future, the people with the different ideas that are going to kind of re-energize the company over and over again, they're never going to stay. Instead, the people that are going to stay are the
yes men.
The yes men. Yeah, they're the people that are never going to challenge the ego of whoever that is that's sitting there establishing that glass ceiling. And then usually people like that they'll just hire in and retain and promote the people that just say yes to everything and never challenge them on anything and back them. Basically, if they were to be challenging the organization, they'll back them. You know, I've experienced that before.
I think people that are in that position, they hire people that are just like them, basically, so that they can feel supported, right, and not challenged. They feel uncomfortable being challenged, especially by people below them that are younger. And so that's kind of what I was saying. You know, these young people are going to get fed up and leave, and they may be very, very smart. You don't want to lose that.
Younger, they will challenge them, yes. Where I've seen it more often is they won't hire older people. They'll tend to hire people at the start of their career because they don't know any better.
Right.
They haven't worked in a bunch. I mean, they don't know that they're getting abused. Basically,
sad but true.
This is a true. Like, if you came to a place for optimism, I mean, you're in the right place. But also keep that resume updated and protect yourself. I don't know what kind of statement I'm trying to make right now. The point was, this workplace that they would never hire older workers because the older workers, they wouldn't stand for this kind of stuff. You know?
Right. Right. Plus, they have experience and different viewpoints that they like to put forward. So again, this person's not going to hire them because they feel challenged.
I feel like there might be people listening to this that are starting to realize, like, it's starting to come into focus. Oh, my team only has all junior people, and it's like we make even like I think about like development teams I've interfaced with that are like all junior developers, and I have to look around for a second and be like, wait a minute, this is so strange. Like we're the development leads, we're the architects. How come the whole company has nobody like this? It's so odd. Like, this is part of the problem.
Chances are that company is looking to hire the maximum number of people for minimum dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well. Again, when I climb the ladder to look, who does all the development hiring? There it is. There's that glass ceiling. There's that person who doesn't want to be challenged, who doesn't ever want to be told. It's not even be told that their ideas are bad. It's their ego is so fragile that they can't even have their ideas challenged, which is difficult for me coming in as product management, because my role professionally is being told that all my ideas suck, and I have to be prepared at any moment to defend any of my ideas against any challenger in the company, and have it not be a challenge to my ego. It should be completely fine to say, Brian, I don't understand why we are prioritizing this. I think this other thing's more important. Can you please help me work through why we're headed in this direction, not that direction? And that should be okay.
More than that should be welcomed with open arms, because whatever strategy you're following becomes truly battle tested, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's being challenged from different directions. Yeah. And so if there are any weak points, they will come out. And you'd rather have them come out there than pursue the strategy and then have it fall flat later.
Yeah.
You know, that's my thinking is fail up front if you're going to fail, and be open to it.
I mean, I like to get, when we're talking at the strategy level, I like to get a lot of representation and a lot of voices in the room together at the same time, like physically, if possible, actually in the room, not
works
not
best.
Just from
What about customers? Get some of those in there too.
I would like it. I would like to.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, there might be people listening that are, well, that would not go over well in my culture, or it would be seen. Not even people listening, but even in my own career experience, I've worked in some workplaces where what I just said, which is, hey, can you show me why we've chosen to go with this path rather than that path? I mean, that right away, Brian's not a team player. Yeah. Brian doesn't.
Troublemaker.
Brian's a troublemaker. He wants to know why we're employing this strategy.
In most companies, you don't even get to ask the question. You're just told, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Now go play ball, because we're doing it this way. So I said so.
I mean, to actually give people a tactic. Like, I feel like the way that I just asked the question, that's the most softball way to bring up, hey, I don't think we're heading in the right direction.
Right.
Hey, can we sit down? Just help me walk through our strategy of why we're going in this direction and not doing this, or whatever, or why we're servicing this persona and not these personas, or whatever it is. Like, if you can sit down with the people that make the product decisions, even if you don't have product managers or whatever, development makes decisions, you have a CTO, or maybe you work directly for a CEO, it doesn't matter who it is.
It's just a decision maker at that point.
Just help me understand how we made the decision. I think That's not super threatening, I think.
It is not if you're really targeting the problem rather than the person.
Yeah.
So don't attack or don't challenge the person, right? Don't say, can you explain your strategy?
Why did you make?
Yeah.
Why did you decide we're going to?
Because that's when people just go on the defensive.
Right.
Just say, I'm trying to understand the direction we're going in. Can you help me with that? Right.
Like, I feel like we've gone way far from the articles. To pick back up on the article, he says no amount of books, TED Talks, and LinkedIn posts are going to take ego out of the leadership equation. Empowered product teams fail because of a lack of trust. Leaders, egos buoyed by titles and salaries, believe they know best. Their teams are here to execute their vision and to do it predictably. The smart people they hired to do the work aren't there to question or cast doubts on the vision. They're certainly not there to change course once a commitment has been made, regardless of what the team learns along the way. Shots are fired in this article all over the place. The creation of the vision, and again, going back to our previous podcast about vision, mission, vision, and strategy, the creation of the vision and the strategies that execute on that vision, I will tell you, very rarely is that a collaborative effort. It's, hey, sales is going to tell us what the strategy, or the CEO is going to tell us what the strategy, or whatever operations, or whoever it is at your company. So there's that. There's that. I can understand why ego is involved when only like one person says, look, I'm trying my best. I'm the only sales guy in your company. I'm trying my best. I got these strategies. I'm trying to figure out how to get us into certain markets or how to do whatever. I'm trying my best. Just don't beat up my work. I have a lot of empathy for people doing that. They don't realize that like sales is a skill, and maybe if you're the sales guy, or maybe there's like a small sales team in a large, like a lot of software development firms I've been in, compared to the amount of like software engineers and developers they have, their sales team is small.
Sure.
So the sales team has a lot of pressure to get out there into the market, especially in B2B sales. However, wouldn't it also be helpful to help spread that sales skill throughout the company, so everyone turns into the ability to work sales, so everyone ends up having the ability to do sales? Like maybe it's not, maybe well, I don't want,
maybe they're not frontline salespeople,
but can you add them to a call and have them understand the basics of, hey, here's how we vet a potential client, here's how we
the whole sales cycle should be understood, right? They may not be able to practice the sales cycle, but everybody should be able to understand what that cycle is, right? So I think there's a couple of things I want to pull on here, right? One is, if you're the person who is creating the vision and then just simply passing it down and saying, this is how we're going to do things,
tossing it over.
Yeah. If you're doing that, you might want to think about working on skills where you can bring people along with you as opposed to just dictate to them, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of going toward co-creating the vision with people. Now, in most companies, that's not done.
Yeah.
Right. At least I haven't found that.
Most companies.
But imagine what it would be though if you call people from different areas, different domains of the business together and say, "This is what we were trying to do. How best can we do this?" And get everyone's voices heard and create a vision from there.
Yeah, that's a different level of collaboration, facilitation, skill, working with others, the skills that basically not everyone has.
I think it starts with those leaders having humility to say, I'm not the right person, the only person who should be creating a vision. It should be a joint effort. If you acknowledge that, then I think it gets easier after that, because you can then practice some of these things we talk about.
On the product management side of the house, what I can bring to this is to say, if you create the vision and the strategies that come from that vision in a collaborative manner, or even if you create strategies first and you back up into the vision, because we talked about that too. Even if you do it that way and you collaborate with all of the teams in your in your segment, maybe you're a really big company and like all the teams is not a realistic thing, but you're a corner of the organization, right? What you'll end up with is, since you have the people that do the work on the teams, or representatives from those teams, or leads, or whatever it is, you have the ability to say, how can we test the business viability of this strategy? What does the MVP of this strategy look like? And also, you can do the old project management thing where you don't get out of a meeting without putting someone's name down to each one. Which team? And it's our world though, so we can say, well, we're not putting names down. We're putting team names down. Right. So I'm going to distribute to the teams. I'm going to ask them to commit. Hey, I would like your team to test the business viability of that. Oh my goodness, business viability of that. Well, we're really a development team. We don't really like talk to customers who don't adopt products or whatever. Well, you know what? Like, it's a great time to figure out how to do that.
That's
like
right.
It would really help the business if you can figure out how to test the viability of this thing before we move it into active development and start building features. Like, figure it out. Listen, you're going to figure it out, or what? Or who else is going to figure it out?
No. So the alternative is what we see all the time, right? That's quite prevalent, which is nobody figures it out. Somebody just comes up with it in the ivory tower.
Yeah, right.
And then people just keep marching.
Right.
This is what I call the sheep march, right?
Yeah.
Just jump right over the cliff.
Yeah.
We're following the leader. And the leader goes over the cliff and everybody goes over the cliff. You can see the cliff from a mile away, but nobody says anything, right? So that alternative, that reality sucks. The smart sheep will just go, wait a minute, I'm not going. And then they leave the company.
That's that sales pipeline. Sit in your company meetings, you hear about all this, but this long pipeline, all these customers, and we're betting this and doing that. And I'm like, I mean, wouldn't it be better if you actually engaged the teams and brought them along through your pipeline? Say, oh, well, here's what I know about this customer, and here's what I've gathered about them. I think this team would be best to be engaged with this customer. Maybe I'll bring them along, and then this other team for this other customer is doing these things, and your salespeople start becoming collaborators with your teams to bring them along and include them in the sales process. A
nice benefit of that is also customers come along with you, right? So you're building trust. The customer builds trust in your company because now they've met with other people, not just people that make promises, the salespeople, but people that are lower down in the organization, the development team members even, right? And they can have a discussion.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I've seen this only very, very sparingly, but where I've seen development leads engage with customers, eventually more business has resulted because the customers can ask questions like, I wonder if we can do this. Well, we can't quite do that, but we can do this. Yeah. Now that becomes a feature that they can pay for. But that wouldn't happen if that dialogue didn't happen. Salespeople don't know to ask those questions necessarily.
I mean, they probably do, but I feel if you're asking questions and you have the Marty Kagan trio, the designer, the product manager, and developer, in addition to the person who's an expert in sales. I mean, now you have you ask a question once, you get the answer. Any of those people can ask follow-up questions. And now there's not a further communication channel that needs to happen. There's not 6 months worth of requirements to get to a delivery where the customer's, I didn't want this, I wanted something else. Like you could find out right there in that opening. That opening salvo, you can find out. What he finishes the article saying is, an empowered team threatens the viability of that initial idea, as it should, in parentheses. Humility is in short supply, and without it, empowered product teams struggle to survive. So again, everything we just outlined about, well, sales brings this along. The easiest case to prove what he's talking about is to talk about all the companies I've been a part of where, sales is incented on over here and product development is incented over here. And if product development is incented on the number of features that you're putting out or hitting X number of bug fixes or whatever it is, and none of their incentives have to do with talking to customers or helping other departments or customer satisfaction in any way, shape, or form, there's a good likelihood even if they were invited to these sales calls, I mean, they're going to be, well, I'm too busy trying to knock out my incentives to
work on features.
Yeah, so if you draw little circles around all the little groups, oh man, like that. It says humility is in short supply, but kind of my challenge to this sentence is, I don't know, is that humility keeps you from doing that? I think the systemic concept of bad organizational design. I mean, maybe you could say it's humility, but I don't know. It's really sort of not.
It's really not just humility.
Not
to your
just.
Point.
Not just.
It's bad org design. It's bad overall system, I guess, right?
Yeah.
The whole system of rewarding people based on X, Y, Z. That you need to look at and say everybody is in it as a company to survive together. It's not just development teams are incented on creating features. They're going to create features, but are those features the most valuable features for customers?
And,
right?
And how are you proving they're the most valuable? Are they getting used? There's a whole post-release measurement apparatus seeking to prove our initial assumption. And in the world of ego, you'll actively work to not look at features after the fact for their adoption rate and to, because it might undermine.
Your telemetry is going to stop at delivery.
It might undermine your initial assumption that says, oh, we've got to build a button that lets a customer do Operation Z. Okay, Mr. Executive, you said that we had to do that, and now we did it, and here we are 2 months later, and here's the measurements of how many customers actually do Operation Z. Nobody likes to do it. Nobody does it.
Yeah. So that's not what that leader wants to see.
Yeah. Well, that leader if ego is in play, they only will interpret that as finger pointing.
Of course.
Like, oh no, you're just finger pointing at me to say that I made a bad call or whatever.
Yeah,
but
you didn't implement it right.
Yeah, you didn't implement it right. That's right. This is a real conversation.
Oh yeah.
Right now, like this is we'll get here in a second about all the data in the world may not be able to climb the mountain of ego unless there's some checks and balances in your system.
Absolutely. And that mountain needs to be burrowed through instead of people can't climb that mountain. Just make a tunnel through it or something.
He has a great story about joining the Tony Roberts band, and he says in a quote, he says, when you join a band with a person's name in it, you have a clear sense of your role in that group. You're an employee, not a collaborator. And that's a little story he has here, which is a pretty good in the article. Which is the same thing we're talking about. Hey, you can bring evidence and say, hey, like we implemented feature Z, and the evidence says that people really don't want this, and we went through the trouble of implementing it because you said, hey, just take my word that people want it, and then we did it. So this is just it should be a small stepping stone of, listen, we should gather more evidence before we build stuff. Again, I feel if you're working at a company that's old Tony Roberts company, the Tony Roberts company, there's a certain expectation right there on the name of the company that, those conversations are
not going to happen.
They're not appreciated.
Yeah, folks, if you're at one of those companies, keep your resume updated, first of all. Somebody like myself would probably just say, okay, product lead, CEO, whomever, we did exactly what you wanted. And here's the adoption rate, nail. That nobody wants this, right? So, okay, I'm not challenging that person necessarily. I'm evidence driven. I'm saying, look, nobody's using this feature. And then, because I'm me, I'd say, wouldn't it have been better to do something else in that time and effort instead? This is our opportunity cost. You layer that on top and you go, we're wasting money here. Yeah, it's been nice working here.
That's exactly right. I was sorry, Oma. Like you don't bring me problems, just bring me solutions. That's the manager I'm thinking about right now, is who says that you just didn't implement it right, and I'm going to double, triple, quadruple down and say we're just going to keep the development team on this feature until it gets the adoption. When in the first place the assumption that people needed whatever the feature was flawed in the first place.
Yes.
So adding on to it and trying to bail it out is just a losing proposition.
That's just like, that's trying to swim in quicksand, right? In the pit of quicksand.
I've seen it way more than you would expect.
I agree. Keep polishing that, and nobody uses it.
I mean, they're again, that glass ceiling, you run into somebody like this in an organizational position that is just not open to coaching, not open to evidence. There may be, like, everything we're talking about, spoiler alert, everything this article will conclude with, it may not have an impact. Again, If you have somebody with no self-awareness, no reason to change, no, there's no spark there kind of pushing that person. No spark pushing the person. What a terrible analogy. There's no
propelling the person. I don't know.
No arm pushing them off. Yeah. This is not getting better. Like, there's no person there with the ability to soften that executive ego. That's his next section, softening the executive ego. You would think this section would give you some tips about softening the executive ego, but let's read it to find out. So he quotes Vince Lombardi. He says, "Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence." Good quote. Good Lombardi quotes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He says, we as an example of this, he says, we may have never spoken to customers in the past, but today, every quarter, we talk to 2 customers. So listen, we know it's not great. Ideally, we want to be talking to customers every day, every week. We're doing 2 a quarter.
It's a start.
Yes. It's a start. We understand we're headed in the right direction, right? He says, if you weren't talking to customers at all, and now you're talking to customers twice in a quarter, you have % extra chance for learning now that you didn't have before, right? So the more you do it, the more your chances increase and improve. So that's the point of that article. And then he pivots to another zinger of a statement, which isn't necessarily related, but is a great statement. Each process change can be measured in the impact it has on the product. That's a super powerful statement.
It really is.
It's weird at the beginning of a new paragraph after quadrupling learning opportunities. It's strange. Its placement in the article is strange. I don't quite understand. But like in and of itself, like if I just stole that and posted it to LinkedIn by itself, like it'd be a zinger of a post. Each process change can be measured in the impact it has on the product. I guess the assumption here is you're measuring the things that you roll out, you're measuring in terms of impact on the product.
Yeah.
You can measure your impact on the product. I guess that's the assumption, because oh boy, some companies don't even do that.
They don't. That's right. So assuming you're actually doing that, you should be able to see
a process change.
Any process change, you should be able to see a deviation above the horizon. Is it a positive deviation or a negative deviation, right?
Yeah.
And through the whole control theory, closed loop control theory, right? You should be able to say, if we do more of this, we'll get more of the impact we want.
Yeah.
We do less of this. I mean, it's common sense, but to your point, not many organizations are measuring the impact on the product of their process changes.
So when you develop a feature and you roll it out, measuring the impact of that feature is one discipline, and companies probably commonly can figure out how to do that. It's probably common. Even if your like technical architecture is kind of evolving and you haven't quite figured out how to measure the impact of features on users when you roll them out, measuring the impact of process changes, that's an advanced concept. Like people think of process changes like the impact on the product, meaning like velocity increase or number of features, or maybe like
reducing defect
rate. Yeah, stuff like that. Not like impact on the product. Like I feel we could take this whole sentence offline and have a completely different.
I like that idea.
Just exploring like how can we different process changes. How might we measure their impact?
That's a very, very valuable podcast, I believe, because it would benefit a lot of people.
I think it would. The thing I immediately think of with this is backlog refinements. If you're not having backlog refinements and your sprint plannings are becoming pseudo backlog refinements and pseudo sprint plannings together, or your sprint plannings are becoming backlog refinements where you just create the work out of thin air, and then the work, as your team picks up work items, they start refining each work item and planning it. You know what I mean? Like you have no idea how long it's going to take something, right. And then you get rollover from sprint to sprint. Process changes that lead to impact on the product.
I'll give you another one here, right? So reviews and demos. Why wait till the end of the sprint to show something to your customer, right? Why not, as soon as a feature is ready to show them, show it to them. Don't wait till the end of the sprint for your sprint review or a demo, right? So you can measure the impact to the product in terms of maybe you have a more robust product because you're getting feedback faster. Maybe your time to market is lower. I don't know.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I mean, you could there's a lot of people out there that say don't measure NPS, but like I immediately think you could follow, like after all of your process changes, you could be tracking NPS as well to see ups and downs, and you know whether or not that's aside from the conversation whether NPS is good or not. I mean, if you just made a process change, that might be the beginning of a trend over time. I don't know. This is a super interesting topic. We're going to pause here because again, I think this deserves its own podcast.
Right.
I don't hear about this topic in the Agile sphere anywhere on the internet, so it's super interesting. Anyway, he says further the idea of measuring the impact on product. He says every win we collect is evidence. We can point to earlier successes and then start implementing them as a default. So this is the old best practices. The old best practices from the 90s. Practice. Yeah, remember? And then he says, as we implement these earlier successes as defaults, step by step, we improve our ways of working. If we can connect these wins to the leadership team's goals, then the trust will increase.
He's right on all of those things. I mean, I just want to point out, he says every win, but you know, where things don't work, that's a learning opportunity too, right?
Should be.
It should be.
Should be. Usually what comes along with ego is the inability to tear apart and really analyze failures,
or even to accept them in some cases.
If you can't accept a failure, if you cannot accept a failure, you cannot ever learn, because tearing apart the reasons why you failed something, like it could be something as easy as, well, this was our sprint goal, and our sprint goal was to implement feature X. And at the end of the sprint, we did not implement feature X. Real cut and dry. We just didn't do it. Maybe we were real close, but we didn't do it. Okay, why didn't we do it? Well, when we got into feature X, we realized that we didn't do enough refinements on feature X, and the critical path that we mapped out, we had to go back to the users, get them back in the room, and talk about it. So I mean, the takeaway from that might be maybe you didn't have the users in the room when you talked about feature X originally. Maybe you didn't have them in the room for long enough. Maybe you didn't have the right people in the room.
Yep.
You know, there's a million things we can do about that. But if you never do 5 whys, if you never talk about if you're not even allowed to say fail, if you have to come up with excuses and sugarcoat things, or pass it off to somebody else, or I've been in organizations where they just blame somebody and then they get rid of that person.
That's right, exactly.
They've immunized themselves from having to deal with failures, so they basically never learn anything. I guess it's. I was gonna say I guess it's good for the people that stay there, but I don't even know if it is, because like, do their skills ever really develop? Like, they're just stuck in like a little static bubble forever.
That's right. That's exactly right. These people become lifers until the whole company goes under.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or it's their turn to accept the blame, and throw themselves on the sword for the
right into the fire. Yeah.
Yeah, that's more likely the scenario in companies like that. So again, keep that resume updated. So he's going to close the article. The title of the section that closes the article, it says, "Evidence will overcome ego." I have big problems with this title, but I'm going to read on anyway. "In the same way we use evidence learned from in-market experimentation, we can justify the organizational design and cultural changes we want to make." And he's bending a little bit into cultural changes, into changes in org design, changes in way teams talk to each other and interact with each other. So he says, if you can repeatedly prove that small changes in your team's ways of working yield stronger product results, you can expand the autonomy and empowerment of your team. And evidence will overcome some part of ego, not all of it.
He just risked himself there.
Yeah.
Part of the ego. Because some egos you just have no chance again.
That's exactly true. And then he finishes the article, he says, "And your customers will thank you for it," which I feel is this, like, out of everything in the last paragraph, if I'm going to take issue with anything in the last paragraph, it's what you just pointed out, which is like some of those egos, like no amount of evidence is
pretty watertight. Yeah. So I think if you really kind of go the distance on this, maybe over time you can mold your organizational structure in such a way where a culture gets to be instilled over time. Again, it's just over time. Nothing's going to happen quickly. Where when you have one individual with that watertight ego, everybody else around them can see that, right, and deal with it in some way. Usually it's pretty drastic. It's, well, we just don't agree with the way you're working here. It's not working out for you. And so maybe we'll see you around. But that again, it's rare. You don't see it very often. And when you do see it, it's never a case of, hey, it's not working out because that person may be higher up in the organization.
My experience with this is when you're tiptoeing around, when you have this individual that, like, their ego is just, you're just not getting around their ego. They're completely going to be a roadblock. No amount of wins are going to get you past this. I mean, unless your executives are willing to make a change, or whatever, management.
It has to be a drastic change.
It has to be a drastic change, because everything we're saying, like, these are valuable skills, like building your evidence, stating your case, connecting it to strategy, connecting it to your leadership and your manager's priorities. All valuable skills in the workplace. All these skills will transfer with you from place to place, and certain people will appreciate it rather than others. But again, once you realize this glass ceilings here, that there's just these egos you just can't deal with and overcome, no matter how much evidence or how many times they have to be wrong, and then blame someone or reject it or deflect it or ramp up that narcissism or whatever it's going to be. I will argue against if you can repeatedly prove these small changes, they'll make a difference. Yes, in some cases, yes, they will. I would say probably in most cases, honestly. Like, with reasonable people, in most cases, yes. But what he ends with, and your customers will thank you for it, that I feel that is the strongest way around one of these roadblocks. Because I remember I was at a company one time where we had a really influential, really important customer. And the team ended up establishing a relationship with that customer, with the customer really liked the product person, and he really liked the team. The customer really liked. I'm a direct communication. I'm a direct communicator. I will speak directly to the problem. I don't like to kind of dance around issues or whatever. I like to jump right in. I don't mind people challenging me, and I don't mind people asking, "Hey, how did you come to this conclusion?" Like, directly, like that. You should
really welcome that, because, like I said before, if you have a thesis of some kind and people are challenging that, and you can talk your way through that, now that thesis is being tested. Right? And the more challenges that your thesis survives, the stronger it is, the more robust it is. So you should welcome that. Otherwise, there's an element of risk there. That's something that you haven't considered undermine your entire approach. So I'm with you. I don't mind people asking questions if they're open to listening to the answers. Like, this is why. And I'm also one of those people who'd say, "Oh, I didn't think of that." Right? And maybe we need to pivot a little bit here. So that's the whole point of that. That collaboration has the value of getting multiple people's insights that can be brought to bear.
What he ends with, and your customers will thank you for it, I feel is the strongest, most helpful piece of the article is to remember to point out to people, hey, if you're stuck in this like battle of egos, let's kind of push the egos and all this stuff off the table and get the customers directly involved, because that ego is much more difficult to maintain in the face of real customer feedback. You know what I mean? Like evidence is one thing. If I have a system and I'm tracking things, and like if I'm in a B2C type of deal where I have end users that are using my product, and I'm kind of watching their behavior through metrics. That's one indicator of evidence of user behavior, and that should be enough to kind of level the egos. But sometimes it isn't. And sometimes people throw out things that they claim are outliers until they funnel down to their. I had a director of development one time who was he controlled all of the statistics. So when you wanted statistics on the product use, you had to go through him, and then he would export.
Oh, he'd filter out stuff.
He would filter out stuff before you get it. So you would never see these outliers to chase cases. Anyway, but if you have the customer's direct input that you're starting with, I mean, once the customer gives you their input, then you can look at numbers from that. But you're starting with a base level of understanding of this is the customer's experience. Let's all get together to talk about. It's not your idea, my idea, whatever. It's the customer's problem that we're all agreeing to solve.
I think that's your best hope, really, is to see the impact on the customer, translate that, and back that into your strategy and say, it doesn't matter who's right, wrong, but this is the impact. How do we change that? And let's just go create another approach. Right?
It certainly helps to have ways to measure customer impacts. But this was a fun article. I don't see a lot posted in the product management, Agile space about dealing with egos. I feel there could have been a paragraph somewhere in here about tactics to help you approach this situation. But we
will include those in our.
We hit a few.
We hit a few of those.
Yeah, we hit a few
indirectly and directly as well. Great. This has been interesting for me because it's not an angle that you see being pursued elsewhere by other podcasts or anything like that, even other blogs for that matter. So this was very useful.
I think anyone who works in product management, if you're not allowed to ask like what brings you to that conclusion, and if your reaction to the question of what brings you to that conclusion, what made you prioritize this over this or whatever, no matter how clunky it's worded, your reaction to that, it's sending a message. So if you're listening to this and you never thought about ego in the past, hey, let's stop and think about your reactions to things for a second.
Absolutely. No, so when you are challenged, don't think about that question or those questions as challenges. Think about those as ways to improve your own idea, your strategy.
It's your communication about the strategies that the company is employed in, because again, a lot of times at the strategy level is where I personally have encountered ego a lot at the strategy.
Absolutely.
This strategy or that strategy. Is the strategy working or not? What should we do if we all agree the strategy is not working? Because again, the people who originally proposed a strategy or backed the strategy or made the original assumption, they got a lot of ego in the game. You know what I mean? A lot of their confidence is built on that thing succeeding. So they're not willing to say this strategy is a failing strategy.
Absolutely. Even though it might be failing right in their face.
It's
because their compensation's tied to it.
It's super tough. I mean, it's super tough to deal with failure. Maybe that's also a separate podcast. It's how you like encountering failure. Like, I mean, you should immediately pivot into what do we learn from this and what can we do to stop failing? But again, once the quagmire of ego is all gumming up the process here, I mean, it's real difficult to move forward to any kind of successful path.
Yeah, I agree. Again, let's end by saying, hey, folks, keep that resume updated. If your ego allows, please subscribe and like, and let us know what else you'd like us to talk about.